Hi, everyone. Today, I will present evaluating openness of DeepSeek's models under Model Openness Framework. We hope to provide a tutorial of the MOF through this case study. We are motivated by three questions. As model consumers, we often use many large models which claim open source. However, one of the most frequent questions is, what are the requirements of their licenses? Are there any usage constraints? The second question is how to quantify the openness of large models or AI models. Are they really open, and open to what degree? The third question is that we are curious about the openness of DeepSeek's V3 and R1 models. Recently, DeepSeek's new models, V3 and R1, have gained public attention. Their groundbreaking open models have capability on par with OpenAI's closed models. We hope through this case study of DeepSeek, we want to provide a tutorial of MOF for model producers and model consumers. In the documentation of V3 and R1 models, DeepSeek claims to fully open source models on papers or technical reports. It pursues its open source spirit and long-termism to inclusive AGI and pushing the boundaries of OpenAI. We all know that AI democratization makes AI more accessible and usable for a wider range of people. However, how to define the openness of machine learning models is a question. For open source developers, they have the definition of open source software and have open source licenses. For example, MIT license almost has no restrictions. Apache 2 and the 3 clause BSD require to mark the source, mark the change for redistribution. Apache 2, the GNU General Public License is copyleft, which requires the derivative of the work must use the same license. However, OpenAI models differ from open source software. This actually leads to open washing behaviors in releasing AI models. Open washing is an accusation against some AI companies that claim to open source AI models but use it as a marketing tool. They didn't sincerely adhere to open source principles. This is because building an AI model requires much more than code. It requires dataset, computation resources, and so on. So how to define openness of machine learning models? Model Openness Framework is designed to evaluate and classify the openness of models. OSI also defines open source AI and releases first version of definition. We will discuss Model Openness Framework today. The MOF defines three classes and each builds upon the previous one. So the most basic one is open model, and then open tooling, and finally open science. The MOF identifies 17 components covering the lifecycle of model development and specifies their appropriate license. These components are classified into these three classes. To qualify for a particular class, the model producer must provide every required component for that class, each released under an appropriate open license. Now let's look into the components and open license. So each component has a content type of code, data, or documentation. The MOF gives recommendations and requirements on the corresponding license. For example, many model producer license model parameters under open source license, but actually model parameters should be considered as data instead of code. So the MOF recommends open data licenses for model parameters, but also accepts model open source license. Here we also give an overview of different type open licenses. The open license for code allows software to be freely used, modified, and shared. For example, OSI maintains a list of open source licenses. And for data, open licenses allow datasets freely available to the public, but sometimes under certain conditions. This condition can be attribution requirement. Users must credit the creator when modifying or redistributing the work. CC BY requires the user to provide the name of the creator and indicate any modification. And as we said before, such as Apache 2, mark the source, mark the change. It's also attribution requirement. Another restriction can be share alike, where the derivative work must be licensed under the same or similar license as the original. So CC BY SA is a share alike license. For documentation, it's similar. It allows free distribution and use of copyrighted works under certain conditions. Typical licenses are from a Creative Commons license. Here we evaluate the openness of different model components for different large language models. The green check mark means this component is open and licensed under type-appropriate open license. The yellow tilde means this component is open to public, but it's not licensed appropriately. The red cross means this component is not included, it's not public. We can see that popular closed models, they don't qualify class 3 open models, and they only open evaluation data, evaluation results, and some technical report or paper. And for Llama 3.1 models, they open source most components required by class 3. However, it uses its own license, Llama 3.1, which have restrictions on commercial use and trademark. And IBM Granite nearly satisfies class 3, except that their technical reports are published on their own website, the IBM website, and doesn't specify open license. DeepSeek models is here. We can see that it also almost satisfies class 3. So the middle part of here almost satisfy class 3, and data card and sample model output won't cost too much effort to provide, and sample model output is actually optional. And for Crystal Coder and Crystal Chat, they nearly satisfy open tooling, except that it doesn't have evaluation code, and model metadata is, I think, model metadata is optional component. And Aquila VL2B achieves open science. This table is reorganized by content type, code, data, and documentation. The result is the same. Now let's look into DeepSeek V3 and R1 models. As we said before, open licenses often have attribution share alike these requirements. They will construct dependency trees among models and their derivatives. The DeepSeek V3 series has code licensed under MIT and model licensed using DeepSeek license agreement. R10 and R1 are obtained by reasoning fine-tuning V3 base. Their code and model are licensed under MIT. And then DeepSeek R1 is distilled to smaller models, the Llama 3 series and Q1 2.5 series, each licensed under their original licenses. Here shows some general details about DeepSeek V3 and R1. The first table is basic information, and the second table is mainly about their training techniques and cost. The third table is about model deployment requirements. Now let's look at the model components and licenses. We can see that the model parameters of V3 are licensed under DeepSeek license agreement. And for the research paper, on the archive, they use the archive license, which only gives the distribution right to the archive, so it's not open license. Based on these results, we can conclude that DeepSeek V3 and R1 are mainly at class 3 open model in the MOF. Although the data card is not formally included, DeepSeek reports have some information about the dataset and dataset construction in their research papers, and it won't cost too much effort to provide this data card. In addition, in class 2 open tooling, the training, validation, and testing code is not included. DeepSeek open sources their code for modeling and supporting tools. Since the evaluation data public benchmark datasets, we consider this component as included, and the evaluation results can be reproducible to some extent. DeepSeek hasn't yet reached class 1 open science without open sourcing its dataset, data processing code, and intermediate model parameters. Remember that DeepSeek v3 uses DeepSeek's own license, and looking into this license, it grants broad intellectual property rights for the use, distribution, and modification of the model. It only restricts the usage of models. These restrictions are mainly about illegal, military, and unethical usage, so we consider DeepSeek's license generally supports open source. This is all for DeepSeek's open